We've become bored of watching YouTubers give us phony drama. They're tired of reactions and commentary. The world he inhabited may be counterfeit, but it's genuine. It's not always Shakespeare, but it is always Kino.
Today is the day. We're not leaving this house until we watch all 3 Lord of the Rings extended versions, back to back to back.
We find many people let his video essay playlist play at night for comfort.
Well, for me, there is no difference between public and personal life. My life is my life. It's the Kino corner.
No excuses. We're locking ourselves in.
It's all true. Nothing is fake. Everything you see here on this channel is real. It's all merely controlled.
It's gonna be tough and grueling. And if you run out of food and I'm no longer alive, then use my body for sustenance. It's an order, damn it! Eat me!
Hey Isaac, hurry up.
Coming!
Welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Kino Corner. Today we are in Seaside, Florida, the town in which the Truman Show was shot. Yes, it's a real town and not a Hollywood set. It is right in between Destin and Panama City Beach on the famous 30A road in Northwest Florida. Let us begin. But there's a reason that this town works so perfectly for the movie. Now, before that, let's get into what the movie actually is. The Truman Show is a 1998 sci-fi drama about Truman, an unwilling reality TV star, as he discovers that his entire life is a Hollywood soundstage. Released in 1998, the film serves as both Jim Carrey's transition from comedy to drama, as well as a bleakly accurate depiction of the world to come. It's a modern classic, and Peter Weir's most successful film to date, both critically and commercially. It's a film I never really tire of. It's got this charm to it, and the charm overpowers the dystopian and dark ideas and themes within the film, making the darkness palatable. You know, it makes us forget how dark the movie really is. But the movie could have been a lot darker. Andrew Niccol's original draft took place in New York City. It was dark and depressing. So even though Peter Weir admired the script, loved it even, he knew that it inherently couldn't work. He wanted the show to be optimistic. He wanted the Truman Show to be a world in which the people who watched it could escape into, an idyllic place. So he moved the location from the crime-ridden streets of New York to the idyllic seaside resort of Sea Haven. 16 drafts later, and they finally had what Weir was looking for. But it wasn't enough for Weir to just have a script. He needed justifications for absolutely everything in the world. Some of these justifications made it into the script, such as the conjugal nature between Meryl and Truman, but some of these justifications were in writings that didn't make it into the script, but did influence the creative professionals such as the director himself, the actors, production designer, etc. For example, Weir wrote a backstory to Christoph. In this world, Christoph was a documentary filmmaker who won an Oscar for making a film about the homeless. And when Christoph started the Truman Show, it was only meant to watch the first year of a child's life. It was a limited experiment. So the only actress was the mother, and the set was very small. However, everyone loved it, and it went for a second season, a second year. So they brought in the father and expanded the set. This kept happening until they had a full-on beachside town, which became Sea Haven. Weir not only wanted the audience to believe that this was real, but he wanted himself to believe that this could be real. He also wrote backstories for the other actors. Think about it. These people grew up with Truman. So to Truman, they were his family, his friends, and his lovers. To them, they were paid actors playing roles, and Truman was the main star. No doubt they developed friendships and actual romances. However, it was always under this weird pretense, so Weir had to write motivations for each actor. Marlon probably did see Truman as his own best friend. Meryl, on the other hand, was in it for the money. She was probably making backroom deals with all these corporations to get that sweet, sweet ad revenue. And the more she did with Truman, the more she got paid. Almost nothing was off limits to her. The film doesn't make it extremely clear, but we can definitely sense it in how the actors perform. So, based on all of this, the set in which Truman lives, that is, the town of Sea Haven, is probably less than 30 years old, if we're judging its age based on Truman's age. But what if I told you that the town of Seaside is more like Sea Haven than you might think? Let's rewind back to 1946. A man named J.S. Smolian bought 80 acres of land in northwest Florida. He initially wanted to turn this bit of land into a summer camp, but that didn't pan out, so he ended up just not doing anything with it. It was his grandson, Robert Davis, who had turned this undeveloped tract of land into Seaside, Florida. In the 1970s, Robert was working as a developer and builder in Miami, and he was quite successful at it too. But he had a dream to revive Northwest Florida's building tradition in his grandfather's spot of land. He wanted to recreate the cottages of his youth, so he and Darrell Davis enlisted the help of architects Andre Duaney and Elizabeth Plater-Zyberk. After much research and development, the project grew from just building cottages to building an entire small town, and 80 acres, or about a quarter square mile, was the ideal initial size. Everything that was necessary for living would be within walking distance of any cottage. As far as its rules for expansion, everything that was to be built after the initial development needed to conform to the architecture of the original buildings. Seaside officially opened in 1982 and served as a shining example of what is called New Urbanism, which is an urban planning approach that focuses on creating human-scaled towns in which everything is within walking distance. And get this, remember how I said that Davis built the town on his family's plot of land? Yeah, well, the land is still privately owned. That's right, Seaside is unincorporated. So let's think. By the time the Truman Show released, this town was only 16 years old. On top of that, the town is completely privately owned, much like Sea Haven in the movie. I'm sure that these similarities played a role in Ware choosing to shoot here.
So now that we've blended the distinction between reality and fantasy, let's dive deeper into the meaning and philosophy of the film. What is the movie about?
If you've taken any Intro to Philosophy course, then no doubt you've heard of Plato's allegory of the cave. You might know of it even if you have no interest in philosophy. But for those of you who don't, here it is in simple terms. A man is chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows move about on a wall in front of him. There's a great fire that casts this light, and the shadows are cast by objects carried by people that the prisoners cannot see. So one day, a prisoner is freed. The prisoner might look into the fire and be blinded, frightened by the truth, and wish to go back into their shackles. But Plato suggests that another prisoner who has been outside the cave could force his prisoner up the rough and steep ascent out of the cave. Once the prisoner is outside, it would take time to adjust to the light of the sun, but soon enough, the prisoner will see clearly.
This is a bit of a simplification, sure, and it's not the entire allegory, but it is the bit that is relevant to the movie. Think about it. Truman is the prisoner, and the shadows he is forced to watch are all of the Hollywood sets, actors, props, etc. His whole life is a shadow. And there are a plethora of crew members working behind the scenes to keep up the illusion.
This is his world. It's all he knows, so he doesn't question his nature of reality, that is, until he meets Lauren. Lauren tells Truman the truth about his existence, but it's a shock to him. He's not exactly prepared to accept this truth at this time, but he's in love with her, and by God, he'll travel all the way to Fiji to find her. And it's this quest for love that leads him out of the cave. Maybe she doesn't drag him out, but the force of love is strong enough to pull him out of this false world. It's interesting that the cracks in the world show when he tries to leave. The buses don't run, the flights are all booked. His wife constantly tells him to save up for another few months. His wife also suggests they have a baby instead. And there are forest fires and leaks at the nuclear plant, barring anyone from driving away from Sea Haven. Maybe he could brush off the light falling from the sky. But the inconsistencies of the world add up to a point where he can no longer deny them. And so, the only way that he can escape the cave is by facing his biggest fear, the water. He sets sail on an arduous journey across a small ocean, and Kristoff, not wanting him to leave, ensures the waters are as rough as they can be. But even Kristoff stated that if Truman wanted to leave, there was nothing he could do to stop him. So Kristoff has to relent and allow Truman to depart from his show. And the moment that Truman's hand touches the painted sky, he knows the truth. He takes a bow, now knowing that the whole world was built for him, and he was its star, and he promptly exits the stage.
But the Truman Show was made at the end of the 20th century, not during ancient Greece. So surely, there were other philosophical influences on the film.
Now, I can't know for sure if Ware and Nickel developed the script with this philosophy in mind, but I have a strong sense that Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation, which released in 1982, influenced the movie immensely. For reference, The Matrix, which came out in the following year, was also inspired by this text, so I think it's safe to assume that this philosophy was popular in Hollywood at the time. This isn't a philosophy lecture, so I'll just touch on the basics of what you need to know in regards to the movie, but I'll have some links in the description if you want to know more. Baudrillard defined simulation as the occurrence of something real which has no origin, or reality through the use of models, a hyperreality. Basically, a simulation is like reality, but it's not reality. It's easy to see this in the movie. Sea Haven is an approximation of an American small town. It feels real, but it's not real.
But it goes deeper than that. Baudrillard saw postmodern society as a simulation in itself. That there is no real point of origin for the reality in which we live. That what we're experiencing are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies, so on and so forth. And it's because of this. Media imitates life, then life imitates media, then media imitates that version of life. Soon enough, we are far removed from that base reality.
Baudrillard also believed that in a post-structuralist, postmodern world, people would create their identities out of what they consume because their core beliefs and truths have been shattered. And he believed, and I would say rightly so, that it would be the media, the pop culture, that gives these people their identities. It explains all the Star Wars fanboys treating that movie franchise like a religion. In this new world, we are shaped by images, and our reactions to the images shape the future images. Going back to the movie, the whole show is an approximation of an ideal of mid-20th century American life. Christoph sees it as a safe and wonderful haven in a sick world. But this show takes place in the future, so perhaps it's actually an approximation of that kind of life based on decades or a century of ever-changing media. What we know is that it is not that life, and it can never be. And look at how Christoph uses images to shape Truman's worldview. He sees faked baby pictures of himself at Mount Rushmore to give him the illusion that he is free to travel. Posters decorate the walls of the travel agency, scaring him of the dangers of traveling. The television shows air episodes about the importance of staying home. Truman's life is controlled by the images that surround him. But there's a flip side. You see, the images of Truman's life influence society at large. The whole world watches The Truman Show. And why is that? Is the world that bad that people want to escape into this fake world that is safe and warm and happy? We don't really know because the film doesn't show us much outside of the studio, but what we do know is that people build their identities around Truman. Bars are made in his name, people know his entire life story, they watch his show all day long, they buy his merch, and so on. He's a staple of just about every household. He's a sort of god of the small screen. So while Truman builds his identity around falsehoods presented to him by the studio, the viewer's identities and actions are influenced by his identity and actions. Copies of copies of copies. But Truman sees the simulation for what it is, and he rejects it and sets out to search for reality. He takes the metaphorical red pill, but is he just leaving one simulation for another? Perhaps. We don't know what happens after the film ends, but personally, I'm optimistic for Truman. But not so for the viewers. The last scene in the film could be seen as a throwaway gag, but it really strikes a chord with me.
The security guards look for what else is on TV. Now that the Truman Show is over, they carelessly throw away that part of their identities, that part of their lives, to search for something else to fill the void. So, was the show really that important to them? Or was it only important in the fact that it entertained them and allowed them to not exist in reality while they watched the show? Maybe Truman is the only real winner in the movie, but it's good enough that he is successful in escaping his simulation. All right, so I think we should go back to the car. We'll come back in and we'll record this. I say, there has been a lot of talk about how the Truman Show predicted reality television, and I generally agree with that. In the 2000s, we saw the rise of shows like Big Brother and Jersey Shore, which purport to showcase real people and real stories, but are controlled behind the scenes from teams of producers, so as to be more dramatic versions of real life. Now there are whole television networks like TLC that are focused on making content like this. I'd even add in YouTube vloggers in that sort of phenomenon. And you know what? I don't see this trend ending anytime soon. What do you think about that? That sounds good, right? And then I'll go into, you know, it's funny. In The Truman Show, the story is about a man escaping from a fake life that was recorded for everyone to see. In reality, everyone is rushing to take his place. All right, let's go back to the car.
Music was an experiment, the first YouTuber adopted by YouTube. a show about a real person making real videos. To say that it was revolutionary is an understatement. It's constantly revolutionary.
But what if he doesn't want this life?
If he discovers the truth, if he wants to leave, well, there's nothing we can really do to stop him.
Kino, the YouTubers depend on you to do this.
Hey Kino, you sure look thirsty right now. Here, wouldn't you like to try some of Barrett's sugar-free ginger beer? For all the weightlifting chads and their needs.
Just what I need. My after-workout ginger beer. Andrew, I gotta tell you,
What is it, Kino?
I'm thinking of going away.
Oh geez, Kino. You don't say.
Yeah, I want to travel the world, I want to go to Paris, Moscow, I want to go to places in Bangkok where people tell me I shouldn't,
But Kino, we're under lockdown right now, Kino. There's nothing out there for you. Just stay here with your chads and your friends and your family.
Well, I'm glad I stayed here. If you like the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I've also recently set up a Patreon, and I'm going to be using the money from that to increase the production quality of my videos. I've also got a second channel to put up less edited videos and more sort of spur-of-the-moment type of videos, so check that out. And as always, if I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Oh, did Leafy just upload?